You ever notice how the G20 summit sometimes feels less like a policy meeting and more like a ritualized stage for humiliation? Not the casual media caught in slip humiliation, but a deliberate systemic setup, the kind of humiliation designed to produce leverage over someone, the kind that reminds them, we see you, we control the game. Step out of line and you will regret it. In Hollywood, this works on celebrities. They are cast in roles that exposes them, makes them vulnerable, and creates a permanent record. Directors, studios, and producers know the leverage that this gives them. Now, think bigger. Imagine that same logic applied to entire nations and their leaders. That could easily be the G20 summit. Consider the first summit in Washington, D.C. in 2008. The US was hosting at the absolute low point of its modern economic history. Lehman Brothers had collapsed, banks teetered on the edge, millions of people were losing their jobs, and yet the US had to perform, lead the world stage, project calm, coordination, stability, with cameras everywhere and journalists dissecting every gesture, every phrase. The American leadership had no choice. Look competent, or the world interprets weakness, and domestic enemies could exploit it. Hosting the summit was not only an economic exercise, maybe it was a ritual of controlled humiliation, a test of whether a nation could project authority while internally crumbling. Canada in 2010 is another example. Toronto rolled out an over 850 million Canadian dollar security and hosting extravaganza at a time when citizens were angry about spending, jobs were precarious, and inequality was growing. The Canadian government had to look like a capable, wealthy, and organized host, while behind the scenes, the population was questioning their priorities. The ritual is clear: present the image, absorb scrutiny, and maintain control. And the leverage is that if officials failed publicly, domestic critics and international observers would amplify the failure, and careers would be curtailed, budgets would be cut, and political reputations would be permanently marked. The shame of hosting at the wrong moment becomes power over the host itself. South Korea in 2010 hosted Seoul's summit while still digesting the global recession. Domestic household debt was climbing, and tensions with North Korea were constant. The world was watching how the host managed logistics, security, and diplomacy. Leaders had no choice but to perform flawlessly. Any minor misstep was broadcast globally. The humiliation ritual is inescapable. Your nation's failings are visible, but you are forced to perform as if they don't exist. Fail the performance, and your credibility, leverage, and negotiation power diminish. Russia in 2013 provides perhaps the clearest parallel. St. Petersburg hosted amid slowing growth, capital flight, corruption scandals, and public protests. The country poured resources into staging a perfect summit with gala dinners, cultural performances, carefully choreographed appearances. The world applauded the spectacle, but the ritual itself was the leverage. Russia had to perform competence and legitimacy while its internal vulnerabilities were glaring. Failure will be interpreted as weakness by the international community, and perhaps more dangerously by domestic elites who expect the leadership to maintain face. The public performance creates leverage for others over you. A misstep is leverage that your rivals, domestic or foreign, can exploit. Germany in 2017 hosted Hamburg in the middle of a refugee crisis and political fragmentation. The city became a battlefield with protesters clashing with the police. Yet the summit was executed with precision and moral messaging about globalization and climate change. The leverage here is subtle but powerful. By forcing Germany to host at a moment of intense internal strain, the world and global leaders witnessed the contrast between the nation's image and its vulnerabilities. Merkel, or the German administration, had no choice but to absorb scrutiny and continue the performance. The ritual punishes by visibility. Even emerging economies are not immune. Indone- Indonesia in 2022, hosting Bali, faced fiscal stress from pandemic recovery, corruption, and environmental crises. Yet the nation had to project success, stability, and global competence. Any hiccup would be amplified by G20 partners, global media, and rating agencies. South Africa in 2025 is walking a similar path with power blackouts, unemployment above 30%, municipal dysfunction, and political discontent. Yet the government must project control, polish, and hospitality. Every slip, every logistical misstep, every poorly received speech is documented, remembered, and held as leverage, just like a Hollywood humiliation ritual for a star. The pattern is clear. Hosting the G20 is never neutral. It's a calculated exposure to scrutiny. Leaders are forced to stage a performance knowing that the audience, the world, sees both the show and the cracks behind it. The leverage for other leaders is immense. Weak performance can be exploited in negotiations, bilateral deals, or multilateral policy. Domestic audiences also become part of the ritual. Failure is internalized, criticized, and held over leaders, and most of them with good reason. And yet, this is why countries still compete to host. There's prestige, visibility, and the chance to push specific agendas. But the ritual always contains the threat of leverage through humiliation. The host must act flawlessly, project stability, and absorb scrutiny, often while facing domestic crisis. Every summit becomes a rehearsal for global theater. One part leadership, one part performance, one part strategic humiliation. And like a celebrity who knows the director controls their career, a leader knows the world powers are watching, recording, and using these moments as leverage. The stakes are worldwide, not just national. So, yeah, world leaders also seem to have a humiliation ritual if we are to see it from the perspective where they use strategic exposure to shame, to create leverage. And yeah, that is what the G20 most likely is for them. Nations perform at the highest stakes, the cameras never blink, and the audience never forgets. The ritual is real, the leverage is real, and the humiliation, whether it's overt or subtle, is baked into the very design of hosting the G20 summit, even when it could be argued there's just no need for it.